Detachment, when you stop gripping so tightly, you create space for the other person to step forward. Desperation communicates scarcity, while detachment communicates value. Letting go doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you no longer hinge your self-worth on someone else's behavior. That shift changes the entire dynamic. To scarcity and the psychology of desire, human beings chase what feels scarce, and they take for granted what feels guaranteed. When you stop over-investing, you stop being the one always available, always giving, always proving. Suddenly, the balance of energy changes and it awakens a deeper level of appreciation, even pursuit. 3. Reclaiming self-worth and standards. Letting go isn't about playing games. It's about protecting your dignity and elevating your standards. When you pull your energy back, you remind yourself and the other person that you are not defined by their approval. That inner confidence is magnetic. 4. The freedom of letting go. True power lies in the ability to walk away. When you stop caring about the outcome, you free yourself from fear, anxiety, and overthinking. That freedom shifts your energy from neediness to self-assurance, and often, it's in that very moment of release that the other person starts chasing. Let's take this first key point and expand it into a full 800-word segment in Matthew Hussey's voice. Conversational, insightful, psychological, and practical. Here's the draft. We often assume that caring deeply for someone means holding on tighter, proving our commitment, and showing them in every possible way that we're invested. But here's the paradox: the more we grip, the more we smother, the more we unintentionally diminish our value in their eyes. Because what feels like devotion from our side can very easily register as pressure from theirs. And pressure rarely inspires desire, it inspires escape. Think of relationships like breathing. You inhale, you exhale. There's a natural rhythm of closeness and space. When you take in a deep breath, at some point you have to let it go. Imagine if you tried to hold it in forever. It becomes suffocating, not life-giving. That's what happens emotionally when we cling too tightly to someone. What starts as love or attraction quickly turns into a form of suffocation. And the irony is, the very thing we fear most, that they'll pull away, becomes more likely precisely because we refuse to loosen our grip. Now, I'm not talking about withdrawing all emotion or playing cold, manipulative games. Detachment in this context doesn't mean apathy. It doesn't mean you don't care at all. It means you stop outsourcing your sense of worth to another person's validation. It means you no longer need their constant reassurance in order to feel secure in yourself. That distinction is vital. Because when you detach in this healthy way, you communicate something incredibly powerful. I want you, but I don't need you to survive. That statement alone shifts the dynamic. Psychologists often speak of the paradox of control. The more you try to control someone else's perception of you, the less control you actually have. But the moment you stop trying so hard, when you return to yourself and invest in your own energy, that's when you gain influence, not through force, but through freedom. People are drawn to what feels free, not what feels trapped. Think back to times when someone liked you more than you liked them. Remember how, when they tried too hard, it wasn't attractive. Their constant availability, their eagerness, their unwillingness to create space, it didn't make you lean in, it made you pull away. It wasn't because you were cruel or unkind, but because their lack of boundaries took away the mystery, the intrigue, the sense of balance that attraction needs. When we overcare, we risk slipping into that same pattern without even realizing it. The most magnetic people aren't the ones shouting the loudest for attention or bending over backwards to prove they're worthy. They're the ones who can stand in a room fully present, connected, but with a quiet confidence that says, I'm whole with or without you. That aura doesn't come from arrogance, it comes from the deep security of knowing your value independent of anyone else's opinion. Here's where the psychology deepens. Desire thrives in space, attraction needs oxygen. When you stop over-caring, when you no longer chase every text, every signal, every emotional breadcrumb, you create the very space in which desire can grow. By releasing that grip, you shift from scarcity to abundance. You're no longer acting as though love is a limited resource that you must desperately cling to. Instead, you show, without needing to say it, that you trust in your own ability to connect, to attract, to be loved. And let me be clear, people sense this shift instantly. It's not about the words you say, it's about the energy you bring. You can tell someone, "I don't need you," and still radiate desperation. Or you can say nothing at all, yet carry yourself in a way that makes it obvious you have a full life, a solid core, and an identity that isn't dependent on their presence. That's what true emotional detachment looks like. So, when I say stop caring, I don't mean stop caring about the relationship or the person. I mean stop caring in the way that costs you your peace, your self-respect, and your ability to enjoy life whether or not this person shows up the way you wish they would. When you let go of that unhealthy caring, you take the pressure off both of you. You free yourself from the anxiety of constantly managing the outcome, and you free them from the weight of being your entire source of fulfillment. And something fascinating happens in that freedom. Suddenly, they notice the difference. They feel the shift in energy. And many times that's when they begin to lean in. Not because you've tricked them, but because you've rediscovered your center. People are drawn to people who are centered. It's magnetic. I'll leave you with this thought. The moment you realize you don't need someone to complete you, that's the moment you become most attractive to them. It's not about playing hard to get, it's about being hard to lose. And that begins with emotional detachment, the kind that protects your heart, honors your worth, and creates the space for real desire to flourish. Perfect. Let's expand key point 2 into a full 800-word segment, flowing naturally from the first. This section dives into scarcity and desire, keeping that Matthew Hussey balance of psychology, philosophy, and clear practical insight. Human beings are wired to chase what feels scarce. It's not just a quirk of romance, it's a principle you see everywhere. In economics, in marketing, even in basic survival instincts. When something feels abundant, always accessible, always waiting for us no matter what, we instinctively assign it less value. But the moment something appears rare, finite, or uncertain, it suddenly captures our attention, our focus, our desire. Now, translate that into relationships. When you're always available, always accommodating, always proving yourself, you're essentially telling the other person, "I'll be here no matter how you treat me." And that removes the sense of scarcity. It makes you predictable in a way that doesn't fuel attraction. But when you pull back, when you stop giving without boundaries, when you stop rushing to fill every silence, you reintroduce the one element that reignites desire: scarcity. It's not about being manipulative. It's not about deliberately withholding just to gain an upper hand. It's about understanding the natural rhythm of attraction. Think about the last time you went shopping. The item you saw 100 times in the store didn't interest you as much as the one marked limited edition or last in stock. That label alone shifted your perception of value, even if the quality was the same. Scarcity sharpens focus, and in relationships the same principle applies. When someone feels like they could lose you, because you're not bending over backwards, because you're not tolerating disrespect, because you're not sacrificing your standards just to keep them, they begin to pay closer attention. They recognize that your presence isn't infinite, that your energy has limits, that your love is precious. And that recognition alone can wake up desire in a way constant reassurance never could. But here's where it goes deeper. Scarcity works in romance not because we're all selfish creatures who just want what we can't have, but because it forces us to confront value. If something is always there, we don't ask ourselves, what would my life look like without this? We take it for granted. But when the possibility of absence appears, we suddenly evaluate. We reflect. We realize. It's in that space of potential loss that we begin to appreciate what we've been given. This is why chasing never works. When you chase, you eliminate the chance for the other person to recognize your value on their own. You're doing all the heavy lifting for them, convincing them, reminding them, showing them. And the more you push, the less space they have to miss you, to desire you, to choose you. Scarcity isn't about withholding affection. It's about allowing the other person the room to feel your absence, to experience the gap your presence usually fills. Now, let's be honest. For many people, the idea of creating scarcity feels terrifying. They think, if I don't call, if I don't show up, if I don't prove myself, they'll forget about me. They'll move on. But the truth is, if your value isn't recognized in your presence, it won't be recognized by doubling down on effort either. Real value doesn't need to scream. It speaks for itself. Scarcity isn't about playing games. It's about living in such a way that your life, your time, and your love are seen as treasures, not commodities. So what does this look like in practice? It means not rearranging your entire world at a moment's notice for someone who hasn't earned that place in your life. It means continuing to invest in your own passions, friendships, and goals instead of putting them on hold for someone who hasn't shown the same level of investment. It means sometimes not answering immediately, not because you're trying to punish, but because you're genuinely living a life that doesn't revolve around another person's every whim. That lifestyle naturally communicates scarcity because it shows that your attention is valuable and it cannot be bought cheaply. And here's the beauty: when someone feels that, when they sense your energy isn't endless, they begin to lean in. They begin to give more, to invest more, to chase. Not because you tricked them, but because they see that your presence is something they can't afford to take lightly. They realize that if they don't step up, they could lose you. That recognition alone often transforms the entire relationship dynamic. I want you to think about this in your own life. Where have you been giving as though your energy is infinite? Where have you been investing to the point that the other person doesn't even feel the weight of your presence anymore? If you can identify those areas and begin to pull back, not with bitterness, but with clarity, you'll start to see how quickly the balance shifts. Remember this: people rarely value what feels guaranteed, but they fight for what they sense could slip away. And if you want to ignite genuine desire, you have to allow your worth to be felt through scarcity. Not scarcity of love, but scarcity of access. When you stop flooding the relationship with endless effort, you give the other person the priceless gift of perspective, and perspective often breeds appreciation. So let this sink in. The chase begins not when you try harder, but when you trust your value enough to do less. Scarcity awakens desire. And when you master that truth, you'll never have to beg for someone's attention again. Great, let's expand key point 3 into a full 800-word segment flowing seamlessly from the first two. This section focuses on reclaiming self-worth and standards in Matthew Hussey's voice: clear, engaging, psychologically deep, and motivating. When we talk about letting go, it's easy for people to confuse it with indifference. They think it means lowering their standards, expecting less, or resigning themselves to disappointment. But the truth is, real letting go is the opposite. It's about raising your standards, not lowering them. It's about reclaiming your self-worth so that you stop settling for breadcrumbs in situations where you deserve the feast. One of the great misunderstandings in relationships is that if you care enough, you can make someone change. You tell yourself, if I show them how loyal I am, how patient I am, how much I'm willing to sacrifice, eventually they'll see my worth. But all that does is communicate that you'll accept less than you deserve. It teaches the other person that your boundaries are flexible, that your love can be taken for granted, and that you'll stay no matter how little they give. That isn't love, it's self-abandonment. When you reclaim your standards, you shift that entire dynamic. You stop asking, how much can I give to make them stay? And instead start asking, what do I actually need in order to feel fulfilled, respected, and loved? That question alone recenters you. It puts you back in the driver's seat of your own emotional life, and it forces you to recognize that your role is not to convince someone of your value, it's to choose someone who already sees it. The psychology here is profound. Humans are inherently responsive creatures. We learn how to treat others based on the standards they set for themselves. If someone demonstrates through their actions that they'll tolerate neglect or inconsistency, people naturally give them more of the same, not always because they're cruel, but because the path of least resistance is always the one most traveled. But if you set clear boundaries, if you make it known through your actions that you will not participate in relationships that compromise your worth, people recalibrate. They either rise to meet your standard or they exit your life. Both outcomes are wins, because either you get the love you deserve or you free yourself to find it elsewhere. Reclaiming self-worth is not about arrogance, it's about clarity. It's about saying, I know what I bring to the table, and I will not allow my fear of being alone to keep me sitting at a table where I am not valued. That kind of inner conviction is incredibly attractive, because people sense when you're living by your standards instead of negotiating them away. It changes your energy, your posture, even the way you speak. Now, of course, reclaiming standards requires courage. It's not easy to walk away from someone you want, especially if you've invested time, emotion, and hope into the relationship. But think of it this way, every time you lower your standard, you're teaching yourself a subtle lesson that your needs are negotiable, and over time, that corrodes your confidence. But when you hold your standard, even if it means losing someone in the short term, you teach yourself the opposite lesson, that you are worthy of the love you envision. That builds confidence, that builds resilience, and that builds the kind of presence that others can't ignore. The beauty of this shift is that it also strips away the games. When you have strong standards, you don't have to wonder, should I text first? Should I wait 3 hours? Should I act busier than I am? You don't need strategies to manipulate desire, because your life is already structured around clarity. You show up authentically, you offer real connection, and if someone doesn't rise to meet that, you step back. That simplicity is powerful. It frees you from second guessing and replaces the chaos of overthinking with the stability of knowing your worth. Think about the relationships in your life right now. Which ones feel heavy because you're doing all the work? Where are you constantly compromising to keep someone else comfortable? Those are the places where your standards are being tested. And the question you have to ask is, do I want to keep teaching people that this is all I deserve, or do I want to reset the standard so they have to step up if they want access to me? Because here's the reality. People rise when they believe something is worth rising for. And they only believe that when they sense you are unwilling to live below your own worth. That's not playing hard to get. It's living hard to forget. So if you find yourself clinging to someone who gives the bare minimum, remind yourself of this. The moment you reclaim your self-worth, you change the terms of the relationship. You stop being the one trying to prove, and you start being the one who chooses. That single shift transforms not only how others treat you, but how you see yourself. And that is the foundation of attraction that lasts. Not desperation, but dignity. I'll leave you with this: the love you accept teaches others how to love you. If you want to be cherished, respected, and pursued, start by setting the standard for yourself. Don't lower the bar to keep someone in your life. Raise it so that only those willing to meet it can stay. That isn't selfish, it's self-respect. And self-respect, more than anything else, is what makes love worth chasing. Got it? Let's take key point 4 and expand it into a full 800-word segment. This one will tie everything together with a sense of freedom, self-assurance, and empowerment in Matthew Hussey's voice. One of the greatest shifts you can make in relationships is realizing that real power isn't in controlling outcomes. It's in your ability to walk away from them. When you stop clinging to what you can't control, when you release your need for certainty, you unlock a kind of freedom that changes everything. And that freedom doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how others see you. Because here's the truth. Nothing is more magnetic than someone who is unattached to the outcome. We think people are drawn to perfection, to flawless appearances, to the person who does everything right. But in reality, They're drawn to the person who radiates peace with themselves, the one who doesn't need constant validation, the one who can enjoy the connection, give love freely, but also walk away with dignity if it stops serving their soul. That is freedom. Most of us don't live there. We live in fear, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear that if we don't hold on tight, someone will slip away. And ironically, it's that fear that drives so much of the neediness that kills attraction. Fear makes us overanalyze every text. Fear makes us accept behavior we shouldn't. Fear makes us shrink ourselves just to keep someone else close. But when you stop caring about the outcome, when you finally accept that you will be okay whether they stay or go, you strip fear of its power. That doesn't mean you stop caring about the person. It means you stop negotiating your sense of peace for the uncertainty of their attention. You stop living in emotional debt, constantly borrowing scraps of reassurance to get through the day. Instead, you live in abundance. You know that your worth isn't tied to whether someone else chooses you. You carry yourself with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they'll be fine regardless. That energy is irresistible. Philosophically, this shift is profound. It's the difference between attachment and freedom. Attachment says, I need you to complete me. Freedom says, I am whole already, and if we share this journey, that's beautiful. But I will remain whole even if we part. That mindset doesn't make you cold, it makes you strong. It allows you to love with openness instead of clinging. And love given in freedom is infinitely more attractive than love rooted in fear. Think about it. When someone knows they can't break you by leaving, they treat you differently. They respect you more. They recognize that they don't hold all the power. And paradoxically, that's often when they start chasing, not because you tricked them, but because you've shown them that your sense of self doesn't depend on their approval. You've revealed the rarest quality of all, independence within intimacy. But here's the challenge. Walking away is one of the hardest skills to master. It requires courage to look at someone you deeply desire and still say, if this doesn't align with my worth, I won't stay. Most people never do it. They cling, they tolerate, they hope. And in doing so, they stay stuck in relationships where freedom is a fantasy. But when you develop the muscle to let go, you liberate yourself from that cycle. You stop chasing closure from other people and start finding it within yourself. This kind of freedom also transforms the way you show up day to day. You no longer need to play games or manufacture scarcity because you already know your energy is limited and valuable. You no longer need to obsess over timing or tactics because your focus is on living fully, not on micromanaging how someone else perceives you. And you no longer need to fear rejection because rejection isn't proof of your inadequacy. It's simply evidence of misalignment. And when you truly live that way, something extraordinary happens. You attract people who are equally free. People who aren't looking for someone to fill their emptiness, but for someone to share their wholeness with. That's the foundation of a healthy relationship. Not dependency, but mutual choice. Not fear of loss, but freedom in love. So, let me ask you, where in your life are you still gripping so tightly that you've suffocated your own peace? Where are you so afraid of losing that you've forgotten your ability to choose? Because the moment you remember that your freedom is non-negotiable, everything changes. You no longer settle. You no longer beg. You no longer live in fear. Instead, you carry yourself with the quiet strength of someone who knows they will always be okay. And that's when the chasing begins. Because the truth is, people can feel when you're free. They can feel when you don't need them, but simply choose them. And that kind of energy, the energy of freedom, is impossible to resist. So here's the challenge I'll leave you with. Stop measuring your worth by who stays or who goes. Start measuring it by your ability to remain free in either case. Because the ultimate power in love is not control. It's not attachment, it's freedom. And freedom, more than anything else, is what makes you unforgettable.